Okay, so welcome to September's workshop. Why isn't my baby sleeping? This is a masterclass for responsive parents who don't want to sleep train, but want to have better nights. Some of you I know, some of you I don't know. There are a lot of unfamiliar names on the list. So if you're new to me and the work that I do, welcome. If you're not new, if you're on my email list or you follow me on Instagram and you know me a little bit better, welcome back. It's always good to see familiar names and new ones. This is the first time I've run this particular topic. If you've been to another workshop, you'll recognize some of the things that I'm covering today, but I'm presenting it in an entirely new way. And I want to start by sharing with you a little story. When I was pregnant, I studied birth and labor as if I was getting a PhD in it. I knew the stages of labor. I knew when to call who. I knew what was likely needed to make sure that I had the best chance possible to have the birth that I wanted. I studied it like I was like the best student ever. And gratefully, my experience with birth was smooth and what I had pictured, but more to the point, I felt like I knew what I was doing. And it gave me confidence. It gave me security and knowledge and empowerment to speak up for what was important for me. But once my baby was born, I realized very soon that I knew nothing about anything else. I had studied, put all my study hours into birth and nothing about the after. And the biggest part of that, the biggest challenge, more of a challenge for me personally than breastfeeding, than diaper changes, than managing a routine, as hard as all those three things were, was sleep. My baby did not have a great relationship with sleep. We know babies wake up often. We know they need support to fall asleep, but my baby needed more support to fall asleep than any of the books or resources said. He was sleeping less than babies are supposed to sleep, in quotes, at that age. And so I was left just ragged, confused, overwhelmed, and of course, trying now to research sleep when I was sleep deprived and had a baby at home. That was not a great recipe for figuring out how to navigate sleep. I had been an OT for a very long time. I knew babies well, at least other people's babies, but I did not know sleep. And it really made for a very challenging time. It is why I do what I do. Now, I would not be doing sleep if sleep had gone hunky dory. I can guarantee that. And so, for any of you here who have been on that roller coaster of even typically difficult sleep, like normal hard for baby sleep, you know that understanding how it works and having support it makes such a huge difference in how you're able to navigate this. And so, even when it's going pretty well, it can still be very, very hard. So, we are going to go through some really rich content today on how to understand why your baby isn't sleeping, which gives you that layer to pull back to understand then the next step, which is what to do about it. For those who do not know me, I am Heather. I've already told you my firstborn had a terrible relationship with sleep. That's not him, that's my third. When he was born, and in the weeks leading up to that, within that first fourth trimester, well, not first fourth trimester, the first 3 months, I was tracking his sleep in minutes on little pieces of paper in the dark, hoping that if he slept 3 minutes longer, that somehow that meant that sleep was heading in the right direction. I worried for months that he was never going to be able to sleep independently. I thought I'm getting this all wrong. I was confused about the conflicting information. I would cry when he finally fell asleep at like 10 or 11 at night because I wasn't even ready for bed yet. And I had to choose between brushing my teeth or trying to sleep for 20 to 30 minutes. And it was an awful choice to have to make. I wasn't even able to wrap my head around how to help myself better to get the sleep that I needed or to be more ready for sleep when it happened. I, at that point, thought bed sharing was never safe. I thought the evidence was clear on that. And I thought this was never going to end, that I would be sleep deprived and have a baby that was up all hours of the night forever. I'm happy to say that is no longer the case. My three boys, they're getting older now and they all sleep well, although they still love their cuddles and their nighttime story time, which I am more than happy to provide. It's a beautiful way to connect at the end of the day. I am an occupational therapist, if you weren't aware of that. So I practice specifically on sleep in Ontario and Alberta, but I also have international practice that focuses on baby sleep as well for those that are coming out of province. I'm actually going to pause here and ask where everyone is from. It's not a question I asked on the form that you filled out to register today. So pop in the chat. If you're from Ontario, your city. If you're from outside of Ontario, perhaps your city. Oh, great. Someone really nearby. I'm in Niagara as well. Wayne Fleet, very close by as well. Terrific. And Toronto, that's where my first was born. That's where all these struggles started. Ontario, fantastic. Okay, so we often have some international or at least out of province people. They might be watching the replay at some point. Time change obviously throws a loop in this. But I practice within Ontario and then outside internationally as well with my certification. I am a spouse and mom of 3. I love my coffee. I've tried to be a tea drinker, but I just love that routine in the morning. And I'm a rebel practitioner. There are not many OTs out there practicing specifically with sleep, and more specifically sleep through an attachment and developmental lens, where I'm looking at responsive parenting and the relationship between parent and baby to support sleep. I am on a mission, and it is a mission. I'm to support tired parents who don't want to sleep train, whatever that may look like. So let's jump in and talk about what are we going to cover today. We'll be covering what is getting in the way of your baby sleeping. We're going to break this down into particular areas that you can explore when sleep is not going well. Some of those areas may reassure you that it's actually typical, in which case you can save some energy and time trying to fix it. And others are things you can do, like take action on, do something about. So first, we're going to cover how sleep development happens. Because of course, if a baby's sleep development dictates that they are waking up often for feeds, it doesn't matter what you're going to do. They're going to wake up often, and understanding that is helpful. 2, we're going to talk about who your baby is. If we understand their sensory processing and the fact that we all as human beings are sensory beings, and understanding temperament, which is more than just personality. This is an innate sense of who you are in terms of your level of sensitivity, your level of predictability, your persistence, your stubbornness. All this goes into an innate sense of who your baby is, and it will impact sleep. Understanding that link means, again, you can focus on the things that you have control over. 3rd, we're going to just touch on underlying health interruptions. Health issues interfering with sleep are not common, but you can imagine that in a sleep practice, they are a significant portion of the families that I work with. So overall, not very common, but I see them often because parents that are struggling because their baby has something health related getting in the way, they're gonna have sleep struggles, and figuring out that piece is important. And 4th, and this one may feel quite different than the first 3, we're going to talk a little bit about the stories that you have about what baby sleep should look like. Because the stories that you have, the script, conscious or unconscious, that you have about what sleep should look like is going to impact how you feel about sleep. And that in turn feeds forward to make what could be a challenging situation even harder. So I want to pause also for one moment to say thank you to all of you that are here. Again, I know before I press record, I know how hard it is to get here. I know how hard it is to say the precious time that you have, whether your baby is sleeping in your arms or whether someone is crawling all over you, or whether you've had to get a caregiver, grandma, come in to allow you to be here today. I know that it's not easy. And so I'm grateful that you spent the time to be here. My goal is to make this worth your time. There are 4 kind of scenarios I'm going to cover today. I touched on them when I advertised this workshop. Partly in figuring out and understanding why is it that your baby isn't able to fall asleep on their own? Why is it that they are taking so long to fall asleep? And then when they do fall asleep, they're not sleeping for any longer than 3 hours or 2 hours or 1 hour, certainly not sleeping through the night, unless you scored 4 out of 5 when I asked you how last night's sleep was. And the last, they can't self-soothe. You need to rock them and bounce them and nurse them, or have them lie on you, or have them on a particular position on your arm. And it's starting to wear thin for you. So we'll go through those scenarios. But in this slide, I took those scenarios, those why isn't my baby able to do this? I've bunched it together as a flower. And the reason is that these questions about why your baby isn't able to do these things related to sleep, often it's just a petal on a bigger flower. And that bigger flower is everything about your baby, your environment, your parenting, the environment that they're in for sleep and daytime, the temperament and sensory processing skills they have, their history, their birth history, their personality as well. All of these things are come together in what is called a holistic approach to sleep. We don't just look at what we're seeing sleep-wise, but sometimes just a symptom or a clue about what's happening. And we don't often, or sometimes, don't directly work on sleep because sleep, again, is just the symptom sometimes. It's just the tip of the iceberg. And we would spend a lot of time and energy that you don't have trying to fix sleep when it's actually something else. And when we know that's something else, we can put our energy and time into that instead and make way more gains. So I hope that that comes out as we move through the slides today. My goal, again, is to leave you today with some perspectives and some new knowledge about your baby's sleep. I want that knowledge to be yours because when you know how sleep works, that's what allows you to see solutions that are going to support sleep without you wasting that time and energy and without having to compromise your values around how you want to parent and how you want to show up. Those values for the families I work with tend to be responsive parenting, gentle parenting, attachment-based approaches to parenting. If those don't align with you, there is still valuable stuff in this workshop for you, but that's the lens that I'm looking at this through. Okay, so how to solve a sleep problem. There's going to be 4 steps that I break down. We went through this on that initial slide where I broke down what we're covering. We're delving into each of these just a little bit more. The first is understanding the developmental stages of sleep development. And in fact, not just sleep, but all aspects of development. Because of course, when your baby is developing, it's their brain that is maturing. And that impacts everything from social emotional development to motor development, to gut development and digestion, to sleep, to being able to regulate emotions. What we know for sleep specifically is that sleep needs over time drop. So a newborn baby needs a heck of a lot of sleep compared to a 1-year-old. We also know that naps tend to consolidate. Some of you, and I know from my little list here that we have babies from infancy, like really young infancy, all the way to 2+ years. So we've got a nice range today. We know that over time, and some of you may have experienced the nap consolidation piece, naps start to get longer and they start coming together into 5 to 4 naps to 3 naps, and then they drop and they tend to get bigger. We also know that sleep consolidates at night. For any of you with very young babies, or if you can think back a few months or a year ago when your baby was very tiny, there was no day and night for them. It was all the same. Sleep was spread out over the 24 hours. But as they grow and develop and they get hormones that are matched to circadian rhythm, so cortisol in the morning, melatonin at night, they start sleeping more at night than during the day. And that's a welcome thing. But we also, in terms of development overall, we know that there are periods when other areas of development, like social, emotional, or motor skills, tend to interrupt sleep. Now, why would that be? Like, if sleep is developing, shouldn't it just get better and better? Have any of you, I'm going to pause here and you can pop it in the comments or you can come off mute. Have any of you experienced a challenge with a breakdown or unraveling of sleep that you realized was linked to a new skill outside of sleep? What we would call traditionally a sleep regression, but they're not actually losing skills, they're just interrupted because sleep is immature. Anyone going through that right now? I know one of you that signed up did, but I don't know who it was. But these sleep, I'll call them developmental progressions. We know development is changing and sleep is still very fragile or immature. So when you're doing something like learning to roll or learning to stand or learning to walk or learning to talk, it can interrupt things. You saw that happen with your toddler. It's amazing, but exhausting. Yes, because the delight of them having a new skill is, yay, that's great. And then the disillusion of sleep, like it's just dissolving in front of your eyes, like sand running through your fingers, and you can't catch it, you can't change it. It's going through it. And so we know when we understand development, then we can understand why things are happening the way they are. And that can be a huge relief. The knowledge, I know it seems trite to say this, but knowledge is power. And you have a new crawler and stander. Have you seen the link with sleep? Are they practicing at night when they should be sleeping? Are you seeing that they're more restless or less interested in sleep? Sleep's never been good, so you've not noticed a difference. That's very similar to with my firstborn. I was like, what sleep regression? It couldn't get any worse. We've hit the bottom floor already. There's no room for it. So I can empathize with that, Heather. Okay, the second piece is understanding your unique baby. So this is where we get, and this is such an underappreciated area. I'm going to pause to read this comment. Pulling up in the crib this week and it's just sitting up and easier to settle lying down. All these comments disappear fast and I don't want to mess around too much with my screen share. I think I got the gist of it. When it comes, and we have someone else who's always been a horrible sleeper, so you just don't notice the regression. It can only, it's as, there's that movie As Good as It Gets. I think sometimes it's as bad as it gets, right? So with understanding who your baby is, we're talking about being sensory beings and learning from our environment through all of our senses, and also temperament. So with temperament, I delved into this on that one slide a little more than I intended to. I meant to save it for now. When your baby has an easy time with transitions, or when they're very, very persistent or laid back and easygoing, these are different traits that babies bring to the mix that you can't change, but you can understand it. And I can't count the number of families, because just like with health issues, where I see a greater proportion than in the average, across the population, I tend to see more highly sensitive temperaments in my practice, because these are babies who need more of everything, more support, more reassurance, more time to lead into a transition. Well, I say more of everything, but there's actually one thing highly sensitive babies tend to need less of. You'll probably guess. It's sleep. They need less sleep. So parents of highly sensitive kiddos are really put through the ringer. And the families that I work with, pretty significant portion of my caseload, these are families who have kids that are a highly sensitive, highly spirited kiddos, because the impact on sleep can really take a doozy. And they report to me when they discovered through our work, or they picked up a book that they came across before they connected with me, that really helped them identify that they have a highly sensitive kiddo. It changed their entire viewpoint. And I want to really peel this back a little bit, because when you have knowledge, sometimes that gives you something to do, something to act on, something you can fix or change or shift or nudge. But other times, knowledge allows you to let go. And when you understand your baby's temperament, you can let go of the expectation that your baby's going to match with one book or another. And you can look at, how are you instead going to match the need of your baby? That may feel like a let down, not a let go. But from my experience with families, when they understand their baby better, it is a relief. It doesn't make it easy. It's a relief to stop working on the things that aren't broken. Temperament is not a state of being broken. It's a state of who you are. There's no bad or good temperament. There's just perhaps temperaments that are easier for parents than others. But I can also reassure any of you that feel like you may have a sensitive, highly sensitive baby, and I'd love to see that in the chat if you think your baby is highly sensitive. These are kiddos that, the consolation prize is they grow up to be really kids that really stand up for themselves and stand up for the world. So that's your very, very delayed, long time waiting consolation prize for a temperament that can be a real challenge. Any of you think you have, you think you do, and it can be early to tell. You get these little inklings, right? We also know that toddlers could tick all the boxes for all of the challenging things that a parent could go through just by nature of being a toddler. So sometimes it takes a while to figure this out, but when you at least look through it through the lens of temperament, it can be really reassuring. The second piece that I look at to understand who your baby is as a unique individual so that we can support sleep in the way that they need is sensory processing and sensory input. And this is how your baby takes in, processes in their brain, and then reacts to the things that they're getting in the world. When we understand what kind of sensory experiences ramp your baby up and other experiences that regulate your baby down into calm, then you can start shaping their day, their bedtime routine, and their overnight to support their needs. It can be tempting to say, can we just change what they need so that it's easier? And I know it's a challenging answer for me to say no, but we can, just like with temperament, understand it better. And when you do, and you can meet your baby's unique sensory needs, it can be like magic for sleep. And I'll give you an example. I have a lot of kiddos that I work with through families, through parents who need more deep pressure to regulate their nervous system. Think of the feeling that you get if you love hugs, when you get, you're stressed and your partner or a friend wraps their arms around you in a tight squeeze. And it's like the stress just squeezes out of you and you feel calmer and more in your body. There are a lot of babies who need more of that deep pressure. And so many of the babies that I work with where that restlessness and frequent wake up isn't going anywhere. There's nothing that, none of the usual suspects are working. I provide families with some suggestions for providing more of that input during the day or at bedtime, preferably both, kind of sprinkled through the day, so that that baby's nervous system is coming into bedtime and nighttime sleep feeling a little bit more centered. You'll know whether, when you start looking at your own sensory needs, you'll understand just how unique the profile can be. You may love hugs, but, you hate roller coasters or feel nauseous when you're on them. You may love crunchy foods, but you can't stand salty or very spicy foods. These are the kinds of things that when we start thinking through a sensory lens, our babies make a lot more sense to us. And when we understand them better, we can support them better. The third point that we're delving into is considering the health challenges. And as I've said before, they're relatively rare. We'll go through a list in a few slides around what some of these health challenges are. But if you're concerned, then trust your gut. And the only caveat to that being that I work with a lot of families, a lot of moms who are anxious. That anxiety often goes up after becoming a parent. That anxiety can be health-related anxiety. So you start worrying about every possible thing that could be going wrong with your baby's health. That requires support. It does. And you can still be trusting your instinct and ruling out some of the things that may be interrupting sleep. That's where support comes in, right? You can have that support can be twofold. Someone that can help you manage the anxiety and someone that can help you solve any sleep challenges, either assess and address or rule them out. Okay, so, and the last point 4, and this is the one, again, that doesn't feel like it fits, but I can't tell you how important it is. Reshaping the sleep story that's going on in your head about what it should look like. The truth is, you know your baby, or you probably know your baby than anyone else. And I'm going to pause to read this. I'm going to actually click on this comment. Oh, no, it disappeared. There it is. Okay. Husband lactose intolerant and irritable bowel syndrome. Breastfed, wondered if her sleep was linked to dairy milk. Lactose free since 8 months and So you're asking, is her waking still possibly linked from habitual waking from before? Well, that's a phenomenal question to answer during the Q&A. So I'm going to encourage you to ask me again when we open up for the Q&A, because I think that's a really valuable question. So when it comes to babies and what they need, we could read all the books we wanted. You could get a PhD in sleep, but your baby is more in line with what they need, with the basic needs that they have and their basic essence of who they are, than they will ever be from this moment forward. Because as we move through life, we add our own stories to who we are, to try to be more of something that we are, or be less of, or to shape ourselves to fit. And so right now, you're getting your baby at their rawest. What you see is what you get. And so you can trust that they're going to let you know what they need, because they know like not consciously, but they know better than anyone else what it is they need. You know better than anyone how to support them and give them that. What I find is helpful, and you can put this into practice this week if this resonates with you. If you start a sentence with, I know I should do X, Y, Z, or I have to, or my baby shouldn't need. When you hear the shoulds, then pause, reflect, and then reshape the story, because the shoulds are usually coming from somebody outside of yourself, either a book you read, or a TikTok you saw, or advice from family or a friend. And instead, if we turn back and look at the expert is the baby in front of you, then you're starting from a much better place. I'll add that part of that is that how you feel about this. So when you're focused on your baby and being curious about what their needs are, and knowing that you know them better than anyone, and that come hell or high water, you will get through this and figure this out, how you're feeling is going to impact sleep too, in a positive or negative way. So when we're able to look at this as understanding our babies and doing the best that we can, it's going to be imperfect, messy, sloppy. We're going to mess up lots and miss those tired cues, or keep them up too late because grandma visited, or whatever it is. You're still doing a phenomenal job. You know your baby better than anyone, and they know what they need. Just go back to those basics, because that will help you with any of the first three that we went through. It'll help you understand their development, because you're looking at them as knowing themselves well and showing you what they can and can't do. You're going to understand who they are better, and you're going to be able to kind of peel back the questions of whether there's something else that's getting in their way of sleep. Okay, so we're going to delve into each of those a little bit more. We're peeling back layers. It's almost like an onion today. When we're looking at sleep development, it's immature. Their brains are not adult brains. And we know that independent sleep means that their brain has to be developed enough to allow for a few things that are going to happen. Those things are longer sleep cycles. So a baby has a 40-minute sleep cycle, an adult has a 90-minute sleep cycle. Somewhere between newborn and adult, we're stretching sleep cycles to over double. And that happens because the brain maturation, whether you do anything about it or not, it will happen. We also know, again, without doing anything about it, sleep becomes more mature, it gets deeper. So they get into a deeper sleep. And guess what happens when we have deep sleep? We're less likely to wake up when the dog barks, or when an older sibling yells or is pounding on the floor, or when they feel a little bit peckish. They'll be in a deep enough sleep that they're not going to wake up to feed. We also know that babies develop the ability to self-soothe over time. Anyone heard that research around self-soothing at 6 months, that babies should be able to self-soothe at 6 months? Maybe get a show of hands in the chat. Have you heard that all babies should self-soothe? You've heard it 3 months. Okay. Heard it start at 4 months. Okay, I'm being really lenient, but I'm going to blow it all out of the water anyway, because well, this fits in well with understanding that your baby knows best and you know them best. The research, there's often a bit of a leap between the research study and how it's reported. The research study was looking at when and if babies self-soothe. Not when they should, it was just curiosity. Your oldest self-soothed right away, Marianne. Second still needs you and the soother. That's variability for you, that uniqueness that our babies bring, right? So with self-soothing, the study was looking at, do they self-soothe or not? And the research found that some babies, and I'm curious to go back to the research. I'm sure it was 6 months. But again, it was a study in time, a moment in time. At 6 months, some babies self-soothed, others signaled. And the study was written not to say that one was better than the other. It was a question of curiosity around, what does this look like? Well, gosh, there are some babies who soothe themselves back to sleep when they rouse. Perhaps these are babies who are more laid back, who have higher sleep needs, so they're more likely to pull themselves back into sleep without support because that pressure for sleep is really high. And then there are the signalers who call out in many different ways to a parent or caregiver for support to bridge back into sleep. It is not a negative or positive, it just is. And so if you have a signaler, and again, like many of the things I'm bringing up today, I would say most of the families I work with have signalers, not self-soothers. Know that this is a dynamic thing that changes over the course of development as well. There will come a time when your baby or young child will be able to soothe themselves back to sleep, or sleep will be mature enough that those interruptions are rarer and rarer to begin with, so that there isn't a lot of self-soothing that's needed. Sleep also happens because of the brain developing circadian rhythm and sleep pressure. So I brought up sleep pressure earlier without explaining it. You probably intuitively know what it likely means, or you've come across it with your own reading or watching already. But circadian rhythm is linked to the sun and darkness. So the sunrise in the morning raises our cortisol levels. That's our stress hormone, or our get out of bed hormone. And then at bedtime, as the sun is setting, melatonin is increasing. That's our sleepy hormone or relaxed hormone. It does way more. We always think of it as the sleep hormone. It does way, way more than sleep, just like cortisol is involved in way, way more than just negative stress. But these things do develop over time. It takes a while, though. It takes a while. At 2 or 3 months, we can't even measure melatonin yet. And whatever baby got in utero has been used up. So that's where we get this sleep being spread out through the 24-hour clock. Now, with sleep pressure, this is about how long you have to be awake before there are literally things called somnogens, sleepy hormones, coursing through your veins to draw you into wanting to go to sleep. Now, for us as adults, accepting parents of very young babies, because you could probably enjoy a nap right now. But generally, adults can make it through the day without a nap. Their sleep pressure rises slowly throughout the day until it's bedtime. Just like a pressure cooker, sleep will release that valve of sleep pressure until you're ready to wake up again. And with babies, that sleep pressure rises really quickly, so that sleep comes to relieve the pressure, and then they have another nap to relieve the pressure, and then it builds again throughout the day. So when we understand how that happens, we also know that that's shifting. You do not nap. Well, parents of young babies, if you can catch a nap and you enjoy it, great. So let's say adults who don't have young children don't nap. Babies are napping throughout the 24-hour clock when they're born. Somehow we get from here to here, from newborn to adult. It's not like it happens all of a sudden. So gradually over time, those periods of wake windows will get longer. Sleep pressure will rise more slowly, and naps will start to be consolidated. The bottom line here is that sleep development takes time, and we can't rush it. We can support it. We can meet the needs. We can show up with curiosity about how development is unfolding, but we can't skip it. Just like you cannot skip straight to walking. It just doesn't happen. The challenge with sleep, of course, is waiting for our kiddos to walk is usually a lot less painful than waiting for our kids to develop sleep skills. Because walking, as much as carrying your baby may be physically taxing, it is not as physically taxing as being deprived of sleep, having your sleep interrupted. So it feels harder, but it's still the same basic idea of sleep development. Okay, number two, we're going to talk about baby temperament right now, and other things that make them unique. I delved into this fairly well earlier. I don't know how much more I'll delve in right now so that we can leave lots of time for questions. But when you know their temperament, so I'm going to reiterate this, then you'll understand how to support them as best you can. And when you know their sensory needs, you'll also better be able to meet your needs. When you can do this, this feeds, we look at that flower that I showed you at the beginning, where it really is a holistic approach to sleep. When you understand temperament, and if you look at that as being like a petal on your baby's flower of who they are, and you look at sensory, you're going to be supporting sleep by understanding those two things. But you're going to be supporting a heck of a lot of other things too. And anything that we can understand that allows parenting to be easier, not just sleep, but parenting overall, is a good thing. Okay, we are going to delve into health challenges. I want to remind you that they are not common. I see them often because of the nature of my work. If you are experiencing high anxiety, particularly around health issues with your baby, if you are not already seeing a therapist or social worker or counselor, consider the support that you could make to release some of that stress and anxiety and the energy that you're spending on the worry. There's a difference between worry and concern. I look at worry as being like being in a rocking chair where you think you're going somewhere, but you're not. You're just moving back and forth in the rocking chair, whereas concern is looking at mapping out a plan to either determine that there's something going on and then making a plan to address it, or determining that that's not what's happening so you can release it. Here are some of the things that may be interrupting sleep. I picture this as being like walking up a mountain towards mature sleep. These are the boulders on your path. So it blocks sleep from progressing because it's not allowing that sleep development to unfold or show itself. Some of the things that interrupt sleep are colic, reflux, food allergies, constipation, obstructive sleep apnea, and of course, the things that every baby is inevitably going to go through, teething and illnesses. There are many more that are on this list, but those are the primary ones that I see that we can assess and address or release. I would love, so I know we had one parent already indicate that they were curious about the milk protein allergy. And Marianne, with solids at 6 months, she wouldn't poop, so you put her, or the doctor put her on Restorelax, right? Yes. And one of the things that I delve in with a lot of parents, because I do think constipation is underdiagnosed. I have a whole module in my group program on where we delve into constipation and poop. Perhaps not something that most sleep coaches talk about, but I love talking about poop because the gut can be a huge piece of the puzzle, not just with constipation, but gut health in general. Has anyone heard of the gut-brain axis, that connection between the gut and the brain? We're learning more about it all the time. And the healthier the gut is in terms of microbiome, the easier sleep can be. And you're really struggling with that right now, Erica, with the constipation. Yeah, and we did too. And it's a challenge. It's why potty training, poop issues, yeah. Control and fear are huge factors in that. It's a big deal. It's a big, big milestone. So the last piece, and I'll peel back this a little bit more, again, is the stories that we're talking to ourselves about what sleep should look like. I want you to imagine for a moment that there were no sleep books. There were no doctors telling you to do one thing or another. There were no stories in your head about bad habits or should do's or shouldn't do's. What would you have left? You'd have your instincts of what felt like a good fit. And I talk to parents about this a lot. Like, what is it that you think your baby needs? Is there a way to give that to them instead of talking yourself out of it because a book told you that you shouldn't? You also have your history. So you have your experience as a parent with your baby, as a parent with perhaps an older toddler or preschooler at home. But you also have your own life experience in terms of how you were raised and what your relationship was with sleep, what approach your parents took with you, and whether that is an experience you can use and learn from, whether you want to pull from that to support your own parenting. The third piece is human ancestral history. You are not the first one to go through this, and you're not the first one to be navigating how to rely on your instincts and what your baby is telling you they need. We have, since the dawn of time, since the dawn of humanity, parents who have responded to and met the needs of their baby for sleep. When we can think about this being, we're part of a bigger story of human history here, we can know that you're not alone. You're not alone in figuring out this struggle. And yet there's also this innate human need for what the conditions are that support sleep. And when we can welcome and understand that need, we can meet it better without fighting it. So much of sleep is about fighting against these stories, right, that we tell ourselves or that others are telling us. One of the main things I hear parents really lament is the number of mixed messages they get about what to do. It leaves them feeling guilty, feeling shame about what they're doing, feeling confused about whether they're doing the right thing or not. And it's, I've mentioned it a few times already, but time and energy, those are limited resources for you right now. You don't want to be wasting energy worrying about something that just is going to unfold on its own. I'd much rather you be concerned about finding the best path through. And you will get through. You will. The thing I'd like you to do is get through with your dignity intact, with your parenting values, you showing up the way that you want to show up as a parent, with getting the support that you need, and with not leaking that energy to these stories that don't actually fit with what sleep development looks like. We're going to delve into a few examples now, and I'm going to touch on those 5 points or 4 points of what it is that's contributing to the challenge. We're at the 45-minute mark now. I'm going to try to wrap up by the hour or sooner so that we can get going on questions. If your baby is not able to sleep on their own, now we're just touching the tip of the iceberg here. In one-on-one consults and in my group coaching, we delve into these in a really deep way to peel back all the layers to solve sleep. But when your baby is having trouble falling asleep on their own, it could be simply sleep development. They're too young to be able to regulate themselves into sleep. They need you to be able to do that. Their brains literally don't have the neural pathways to self-soothe. If you've heard Gabor Mate talk about this, I don't know whether he shows a diagram, but the circuitry literally is not there. They rely externally on your nervous system to do that. And at some point it develops, in which case they will be able to fall asleep on their own. But it takes a lot longer for many babies than the books tell you. The other piece, if they're not falling asleep on their own, is they may have some unmet sensory needs. Babies need to be close so they hear you, see you, smell you, touch you. That changes over time, but even a 2-year-old is going to have sensory needs that allow them to stay out of alarm, and that alarm gets triggered when they feel like they're going to be separated from you. Separation, and I was just doing a podcast interview this morning and we touched on this, separation isn't just physical when you leave the room. Separation is also through sleep. In fact, I would say sleep is the single most common separation we ask our children to endure. Gordon Neufeld talks about this. He's a child developmental psychologist from BC whose work I rely on heavily when I work with families. And he talks about this as being something that that we need to be able to co-regulate with our babies, and that sleep is that primary separation that we're asking our babies to do. When they're unconscious, they are separate from us, even if we are still there. So understanding that lens of sleep. And I missed a comment. I'll see if I can get it to come up without messing up the slides. I'm just going to read this directly. When my daughter was 8 months, one day I was tired of holding her and put her down in the crib, and she just fell asleep out of nowhere. She just did it after months of being rocked to sleep. This speaks, and I know this is veering off what we're talking about, but speaks to the idea. I talk with a lot of parents who are afraid to try something new. and never needed rocking again. They're afraid to try something new because it didn't work before. Development, brain development, nervous system, milestones, they're all changing all the time. We do what works, but sometimes as parents, we forget that the boat is still sailing down the river. We can try again, try something new, test the waters to see, is this something they're capable of now? And I'm just not seeing it because I'm meeting the need the way that I was meeting it for months now. So that's phenomenal. I love when that happens, but it can be scary because you think this isn't going to work. It's never worked before. Why would it work now? Well, you have a different kiddo than a month ago, and it's amazing how fast it can change. So those sensory experiences, they really matter, but it is a constantly shifting game, as that last comment alludes to. Okay, if your baby is taking 2 hours to fall asleep, or even an hour, part of this may be sleep development. You're thinking, wait a second, Heather, what does sleep development have to do with taking 2 hours to fall asleep? You're trapped in this room in the dark when you would really rather even be washing dishes than helping your baby fall asleep. The fact is that this, as I said, the boat is sailing down the river of sleep development. Babies will need less and less sleep over time. It's not always a smooth curve. Sometimes it's dropped like a staircase where all of a sudden you think, why? Why is it all of a sudden taking 2 hours to fall asleep? Well, their sleep needs are less. So they may be getting all the sleep they need in a 24-hour period. So the total sleep that your baby is getting over 24 hours is one of the things that I measure to take a peek at what we might change to make sleep easier. The other piece is sleep timing. As sleep matures, you know that the wake windows get longer. Your baby can stay awake longer before sleep pressure pushes them into sleep. But these transitions are hard for timing. And that last nap may be really important to get them through to bedtime without having an epic meltdown. But without it, or with it, it pushes bedtime really late. So there's great value in a flexible bedtime that allows you to push it later when you need to or earlier. Stick to later when you need to until that last nap is consistently dropped, and then bedtime naturally gets pulled quite easily most of the time to an earlier hour. But sometimes it's just a matter of the timing. The first 3 years are really a constant flux of sleep development or overall development. And so we can sometimes, most of the time, as parents, be playing catch up on it and just trying to catch up to the new stage that they're at in their development. And that's okay. We can't preempt these things. We can't, I always laugh that, it's like preemptively giving up the nap when they still need it. It's not going to serve you any more than any of the people that tell you that when you're having trouble sleeping when you're pregnant, that somehow you're getting better as you're getting practice at sleep deprivation. I call that not very useful, not very accurate. Let's talk about sleep intervals now and problem solve through that a little bit. If sleep intervals are short, so they're sleeping for very short periods of time, part of that may be sleep development. So their sleep cycles are short, they're not adult length. This is a combination of the depth of sleep, time spent in REM or rapid eye movement or light sleep, the length of their sleep cycle. And it's called sleep architecture. It's how the sleep house is built. And those pieces have to be fit together. And you don't build a house in a day. You don't build sleep in a day. These things will take time. But the other piece, when intervals are short and they're not budging, looking at health issues like reflux or obstructive sleep apnea may allow babies to get into a deeper sleep where they'll be less likely to be interrupted. And basically, feeling well matters. Constipation can interrupt sleep cycles too and wake them up. Of course, illness can as well, but it gives you a little sense of what we're looking at there. And the infamous sleeping through the night. Again, most of these I feel relate to sleep development because it is normal for babies to wake up often and to need help falling back asleep. Babies need to eat. Breast milk is high in sugar, low in fat, although you wouldn't know that by looking at what I pumped with my first. It didn't look very low in fat at all. There was a lot of cream. It was the creamiest breast milk. Maybe that's why reflux was such a problem for him. but babies are intended to wake up often. Human babies need to be close to a parent, that they are very vulnerable, unlike other animals that are up and walking and then hunting within weeks. Human babies aren't like that. They need to stay close. And part of what nature has allowed is this need to be close and to wake up for feeding, which keeps us close. We also, as we know, sleep cycles and duration are immature. So neural maturation matters, and it takes time. And last, if they're not sleeping through the night, often our expectation around this major milestone, the coveted holy grail of sleep. It's not typical for all babies to be sleeping through the night at 6 months. It's also not typical for your baby to sleep through the night and never need you again. That's not how it works. Babies' needs aren't for changing. Their needs are basic. So babies' needs aren't for changing, they are for meeting. So the story that you're telling yourself about sleep matters. Okay, so I can't self-soothe. We talked about this, so I'm not going to go too much into it. We know there are soothers and signalers. The signalers need co-regulation with an adult or caregiver who loves them unconditionally and is calm. And temperament can explain some of it. If you have a highly sensitive kiddo, then temperament's also going to matter. I think that brings us to the end, but I do want to actually, there's one more slide here. So I imagine most of you, even if you scored a 4 out of 5 for sleep last night, you're exhausted. I know that what you want is better sleep. I know what you want is to show up as a loving and patient parent every day, 110%. I know you want to have more energy, you want to be more present. You want to be able to have that feed forward into feeling better physically and mentally. And you also want to have easier sleep without compromising your parenting values of being responsive, loving, attachment-based. Now, you want all these things, and that's a lovely list, but how are you going to get it? Well, let's consider treating this stage of parenting like climbing Mount Everest. I've already talked about those health issues as being like a boulder in front of your path. Know that this is not something you climb in a day. You have to know what tools you already have. And I'm going to suggest that even though I don't know any of you very well, you have more tools in you than you know. You have instincts that maybe haven't been uncovered yet. You have confidence that might be shaken right now, but it can be built. You have some knowledge from today's workshop and maybe prior reading or experiences that allow you to show up with tools that maybe you're underappreciating right now. You've got to prioritize the things that are going to allow you to survive on your climb to Everest, and you need to prioritize the things that help you survive as a parent too. That sometimes means reaching out to get support. And in this slide, I'm calling it the sleep Sherpa because of my Everest example. This is knowledgeable help. It doesn't mean a sleep coach. It doesn't mean you need to hire me, but it does mean that if you can get someone in your circle who is knowledgeable, supportive, and good at validating your experience, your entire climb to Mount Everest, up to Mount Everest, is going to be a lot more manageable. And don't rush it. You can't get there in a day. Pace yourself. There are sometimes real, true sleep emergencies. That is where your mental health is in dire need of a reset. You need sleep, you need relief, you need to tag team out. Most of the time, poor sleep is not a sleep emergency. There is no need to fix it or do something drastic about it today. We can talk during the questions if you're wanting to know what do you do in a real sleep emergency. What else you need is a reassuring community. You need to be with people that are going to understand your parent perspective on meeting your baby's needs, perhaps who are going through this or have gone through this as well. I'm going to wrap up there. That's the end of the presentation, but I'm going to tell you a little bit about the program that I'm offering. Of course, I don't have an entire practice that is all free monthly workshops. I actually work with clients who pay to work with me. And my next offering is one that I'm really, really excited about sharing. So I'll spend a few minutes and then we'll open up to Q&A. This is the Confident and Connected Baby Sleep Program. It is a group coaching program for parents who are looking to support sleep and make it easier for themselves and their baby without sleep training. So it really focuses on knowledge. So taking all the things that we talked about today and really doing a deep dive. The idea is for you to feel more confident about what you're doing and what's happening, and to have a community of other parents who are going through what you're going through or have been through it and have some insightful perspectives for you so that you and your baby can be getting better sleep. Now, who is this for? It won't be for everyone who's here. It's for parents with babies 6 to 18 months. It has been running for 6 months now, so we do have some 2-year-olds in the group, or 2 and a quarter. And the group does evolve over time in response to those needs. But for families starting out, the core content is for 6 to 18 months. We're looking for better sleep, easier sleep without sleep training. If this is piquing your interest, here are some reasons you may want to join. It is called the Confident and Connected Baby Sleep Program, but I have shortened it to CONCON. You get knowledge. And as I said at the beginning, knowledge is power. You get guidance and coaching from me in live sessions. You get each other. So any other parent in the group, the level of empathy and the level of, I'm going to call it expertise, like just that deep-seated knowledge that becomes exponential when you share it. And I would add that you, even if you feel like you don't have knowledge to share, your experiences matter and they can help somebody else as well. I have a whole resource library of checklists and information for parents in the course as well. And this last point is validation, reassurance, and confidence. I can't emphasize enough how much easier parenting is when you feel confident about how you're doing it. And that way you can show up as the parent you want to be, right? I mean, I know it feels difficult when you're exhausted to show up the way that you want to. The group starts October 22nd. That's in no time. That's in like 3 weeks. But my basic premise is that when you have the knowledge and support, you can answer the question, how do I help my baby sleep, much more easily. The question marks that parents come to when they have conflicting information from social media or from books really breaks my heart, because it puts parents in this position of feeling like they're failing. And in my view, when you have the right knowledge, you'll know you're not failing. You'll know this is hard because it's hard. And then we can move on from there to support sleep. I'm going to skip through this slide really quickly, except to say that this is a 7-week program. However, after the 7 weeks of live learning sessions and coaching calls, the coaching continues for a total of 6 months and beyond. Those that joined in May are still in the group. They can get continued access to coaching for the duration of the program. And that's how we're doing it right now. If you join now, it will carry on for the life of the program. Those coaching calls will continue. I'll last say, because some of you may have come to this workshop interested in working one-on-one. I love one-on-one work. It's phenomenal. For those for whom group coaching is a better fit, it is definitely better value for you, because for less than the cost of 2 months of one-on-one, you're getting 6 months of coaching, which is a big difference. What I will also add is those that are joining before October 1st, there'll be an additional discount to the early bird discount that ends on the 15th. And you get a one-on-one session with me too. So it's almost a no-brainer. If you're looking for support, this is a great program. I will add that this really is, to build on that analogy of climbing Mount Everest. This course this program is your map, your compass, and your personal guide. I am so excited about how this unfolded in May, the amount that we could cover and the breadth of the questions, because every kiddo is different, and yet woven through there are similar experiences around navigating sleep development through responsive parenting. Is just incredibly exciting for me to be able to offer something like this, and in doing so, making it much more accessible than one-on-one. Now, one-on-one may feel like a better fit for you, and that's absolutely fine. What I suggest that you do is you reach out, get on a call with me, and we can talk about what may be a good fit for you. Again, October 1st, the price goes up, so there's a nice discount there. If you're concerned about the price still, There are options for installments as well, depending on how things laid out. And there's another option I'll be introducing as well for those that don't want 6 months of coaching. So reach out and talk to me about that. I will now excitedly and with great anticipation open up questions. I'm going to stop sharing. I thought that was going to be shorter than it was. So we've used the hour, but that's all right. We have a half hour still to be able to chat. So you can come off audio. You can come on camera. I'm going to pause the recording now. We're going to just make this something amongst ourselves. So I'll end the recording